There's just no telling. You show up and it's a whiteout.
Jesus, that was Wednesday and Thursday out here.
The best laid intentions just laid to waste by it. There was parties last year, Friday night. There was like the epic parties, you know?
Yeah.
Burning Man and rain. Fuck you. Fuck your parties.
This is my first burn. I got scared on Saturday when it rained. Holy shit, that was scary.
Yeah, you should respect the plan. Okay. Thanks for being the like ad-lib comfort guy. You'll be my like one subject, which is great.
It's cool. I'm going to be so educated about somatic practices and
Totally.
guiding after this. It's going to be good.
Yeah. We're just the opener for Friday. This is all just like cannon fodder. Friday's the big hitters, and the rest of us are just, you know. But that being said, I'll actually
Well, we got you
do
recorded.
my presentation now because it touches that. So, yeah. So part of this for me is this is my 20th Burning Man, and 20, and I've had a lot of firsts at Burning Man, so this is a new first. I've done other workshops here, but I haven't actually spoken much about guiding. It's not been a publicly accessible subject that I've been more on. However, I've done a bunch of workshops on attachment theory and a bunch on this and training and body work and all this fun stuff. So Burning Man has been a place where a lot of firsts have happened for me. So this is up there. Also because I've listened to Palenque Norte since I was quite a bit younger. I ended up the Terrence generation, so there was some very legendary talks given Palenque Norte in the past. My snarkiness about Friday is those are also amazing people. Rick Goblin, Alex Gray, and Andrew Jones, and people I've had interactions with over the years who are just so inspiring and so much respect for. So, that being said, I feel like in general the whole thing is I stand on the shoulder of greats. There are so many greats, so many people who gifted me so much in my life. And I'm not going to name drop because I don't have permission for people to do that. So we'll keep it anonymous.
Non-consensual name dropping.
Yeah. So like, why am I here, and like, what's the whole story? So my orientation, someone said something really funny in our camp yesterday, which is what percentage of Burning Man is neurodivergent?
87.
Yeah, and they were like, it's really high. I'm like, okay, I'm ADD and dyslexic, and like, somehow that makes me somatically gifted. And the other part of it is I had a really intense childhood with a mom who was borderline personality and like a lot of relational trauma I lived in. So my journey of who I am and why am I even here at Burning Man or giving a presentation on any of this shit is based on my own personal story and experience. Which being dyslexic and ADD, I think plays a big role in, and it actually kind of gifted me in some ways. So throughout my childhood, I was always curious about my body and how movement felt and had a real depth in. My parents raised me in a really culturally diverse environment in San Jose, California, and had opportunity to have a lot of connection to indigenous communities and a lot of going to like powwows and other things, and spirituality kind of introduced to my world. And martial arts was also a really big draw for me. Oh, I love it. And so by the time I was like in high school, a combination of martial arts training, jiu-jitsu, self-defense, other stuff like that, wounded childhood, was also interacting with psychedelics in my life, and the whole journey of psychedelics unfolding from there. And around the age of my early 20s, body work and my knack for touch and movement and martial arts all started coming together at the same time that the Native American church entered my world. Ritual and ceremony were becoming a thing. Psychedelic exploration that began as a teenager in high school, and the like psychonaut Terrence McKenna generation. I won't tell you how much acid I ate before I was even out of high school in the 90s. I was not alone in that. But somehow these things began to intersect in my early 20s, and then at the age of 25, after doing a clinical bodywork training thing for a good few years, I came to Burning Man for the first time, and I met the woman who would become my therapist for the next 15 years. So I had and began a professional practice as a body worker in Santa Cruz, California. Golfing and osteopathy entered my world. I'm still a part of the same clinic. Long story from there. Around about 10, 15 years later, the intersection of body work, psychedelics, touch, being part of healing camps here in Burning Man all began to come together, as well as MAPS was based in Santa Cruz. And let's just say one big melting pot occurred. And through that, at a certain point, the guiding community and traveling out of the country, ritual, ceremony, plant medicine in Mexico, South America, being a part of Burning Man, and seeing the intersection of healing, the role of healers and psychedelics, cross-culturally, modern, traditional, getting to really experience all that. And all of a sudden I got introduced into this world of guides, that there was this role as a healer. So I want to ask you guys a question first. There's only a few people here, but we'll get to poll the audience. When we talk about somatic, what does that mean to you? It's like the buzzword now, right? It's the thing. So what does it mean to you? If you want, you can like talk to the talking stick and be official. He does the knee walk. You've done Aikido or something Japanese. 20 years of it.
Somatic is of the body.
Of the body.
Yeah.
Okay. Who else? Even if you don't know shit, you can say, I don't know shit. I don't know what the fuck that means.
Soma. It's the I'm thinking of it as the intelligence and the language and the memory of the brain that is the body.
Anybody else? Don't know. Okay.
My religious trauma will tell me that it's a bad thing.
Oh, it's a bad thing. Well, you raise an interesting subject, which is we all have something about our relationship with our body, right? Like some way or another, right? We're like, my religious trauma comes up as I talk about my body, right? Like we all have some relationship with our body. And somatic tends to mean body. I don't think that's quite my definition. I think it means felt experience. It's the felt. Because that's psychobiology of our body, but the felt experience is our limbic system, right? And so that system and how it works is the same feeling you get when you see a puppy, right? Or whatever, right? Like and that's based upon past experiences, and they become somaticized, the feeling experience. But so are anxiety and depression and other things, right? That our felt experience is this moment-by-moment thing that's not regulated by the frontal lobe of our brain, the talking part. It's regulated by a layer beneath that. So the felt experience of things is where psychedelics also interact, because they are very, very, very much a felt experience as much as a cerebral one, right? So I want to do a little thing with you right now. So if you want, we can experiment with how this all works, because talking about it is one thing versus... So go ahead and close your eyes. And you don't have to do anything hard. That's the great part. You can just chill. And some of you are already like ringers, you've done mindfulness. But mindfulness brings up all kinds of stuff for people. So what we mean by this is it's just the awareness of this moment and what you notice happening now. It's using a part of our nervous system just as an observer. You don't have to do anything really. And there's different kinds of categories of experiences we have. There's the thoughts moving through our mind. There's the feltness of our body, which we can zoom in very particular ways, we can be very general. There's the images that come through us. There's movement sometimes of the body. And there's also meaning, where we're meaning-making machines. Out of experience, we make meaning. And sometimes experiences that we're having are also bringing up meaning. Just mentioning the word somatic brings up religious trauma, and it's like, so you have a meaning-making association happening, right? There's an association there, but that's very particular to you, based upon what? Your past experience, right? So that's it, is like, and if I use you as a bit for an example, there's a feeling of what that past echo feels like. You know, it's not all the memories, it's like it leaves a felt echo of the past that could be felt right now. And again, that is limbic imprints from another time, from other experiences we had. And then what we do is we make meaning out of those experiences. So just notice the feeling in your body and the meaning-making machine. Just right now, here you are in Burning Man making meaning of this moment. And just notice how your mind takes in raw experience from your body, from the outside world, and just makes the meaning right now. And the meaning can be shitty, the meaning can be great, it isn't really, it's just whatever. But this noticing of, and then notice the feltness of your body and space right now, where you are. There's just a snapshot of this moment. And so when we're working somatically, it is being oriented within this felt sphere. So when you're ready, let yourself come back to, and there's whatever you felt in that inner journey of just being present now. We could unpack it all. You would each have some different version of what just happened right now, and you would each have a different version of what is the meaning you're making out of it, right? So this mind-body sort of back and forth felt, because there's other times, like again, fear, anxiety, joy, they come through the body, but then they also have thoughts that go with them, right? And there's a sense of ourself that's having that experience. And so when we think of working somatically, those things are all connected. Movement can have it within it, touch can have it within it. But meditation and other things, they have posture and breath because there's a body that's even a part of that. So it's always this back and forth sort of thing. Why does everyone love taking psychedelics and getting all flowy? Because this state it puts them in, like, woo, So this is the interface of somatics. Any questions? I want to move along, not sort of bog down too much. But that's the territory, right? Because it's such a buzzword these days, and people are like, it means of the body. But I'm like, yeah, but somatic-based therapy can have people very inward with their eyes closed. Psychedelics can have people very inward with their eyes closed, yet very attuned to what's going on. And yet it could also include CrossFit and martial arts and contact dance and yoga and Qigong and on and on and on and on and on and on and on. Right? And body work of all forms, somatic therapy. So it's like, and again, if we talk about ritual has a feeling. Ceremony has a feeling. They are containers for guiding feeling. So that's where the role of the guide comes in, is we are basically guiding experience through felt experience, right? And if someone has an experience of God or these other profound psychedelic experiences, there's a felt experience that goes with it. So that's where it's like guides truly are working through felt experience. And within that, there's like three things that I think really exist broadly. Because when we talk about the role of the guide, it is a timeless role throughout many cultures, as much as we have the warrior or the builder or numerous other things. The role of the guide, the intermediary between the unseen spirit and humans, right? And the healer role. And what is it to be in modern time with it, right? It's a timeless role. And it really uses three main things: healing techniques of various sorts, which come from culture in its modern form, ritual in some form or another, and relationship. And these three things can all also be used somatically in our modern time.
Ritual, relationship,
Healing techniques. So even if you wave a feather or a rattle, right? If you've ever experienced that in a ceremony, there's a feltness to what's happening. There's an attunement between, it's not just the anymore, right? There's something else going on, right? And the feltness of it, or Palo Santo, or sage, or touch, or music, or other, like, look at how people orient here around trance states, music, dance, over and over again. It's programmed into us. Getting into a rhythmic, whether you're taking a substance or not, that is like a state-inducing thing. And psychedelics are essentially, they shift your state of being inside of all of this, right? So the healing techniques are like somehow one person is accessing another person in some way or another. And that can be through body work, touch, it can be through the use of ritual objects, which are like focuses for intention in a way, right? So there's enough, and again, when you look at like somatically based therapy, like when you look at MAPS's research, MDMA, PTSD, you know, you see attachment work, trauma work, what I would call fragmented selves, AKA parts. But parts have like a feltness to them when you're caught in a part or a fragment. It's like a little looping state, right? And it's like we're not whole in ourselves when we're in that. And these are about state of being, and they're about, so these are the main tools these days, right? How do you use music as an evocative experience? How do you use touch within guiding? How do you use any sort of healing technique? Because it changes over 1,000 years. But they all have like where there's a moment where it's really a felt thing going on. Do you guys get what I'm saying? So they were like, yeah. If you've ever, how many of you been in a contained environment for psychedelics with a guide of some sort, whether that was a ayahuasca ceremony or this or that? Okay, yeah. There's an interaction that can happen, and there's also the container and the feeling of it. And just like here, if you go to the dance floor, right? Whoever's playing music holds like a space, and a kind of energy unfolds inside of it, right? And that's what happens inside of a ceremony. Burning Man itself is a giant ceremony. It's contained within that, and there are guardians, meaning if you pass out somewhere, people will attend to you. People are aware that people have taken substances here. Containers give safety to these things, right? So the role of the guide is holding all that. And again, whatever the version of healing techniques are, there's some version. So in our modern world, yeah, somatic therapy, body work, music, these are the main tools of a guide, just in terms of healing technique. And there's a need to study therapy technique, but being a therapist doesn't necessarily make you a guide, and being a guide doesn't necessarily make you a therapist. Therapists do 1-hour sessions within a certain context, and there's a licensing structure and other things. Psychedelic therapy, quote unquote, within the medical system will be holding within all of that. We all know how the medical system is. So, you know, it's got its strengths and weaknesses there. It will be a very safe container within very controlled circumstances by very trained people. But even those people are doing something very different than what they do in the office of an hour therapy session. So, and guides need therapeutic training around the relationship and use of therapy techniques, trauma, and other stuff, because medicine itself, you still have to have skill in working with people. It's not like the medicine just does all the work. So, you know, that's sort of the back and forth there. I said movement, working with the body, working with other things, it's all what comes into it as healing techniques. That being said, the next category is ritual, and ritual is, what it really is it's a framework for the unconscious to unfold in. It begins the moment somebody has an intention to want to do a journey. How do you take whatever's going on in someone's life in some way as a unique flow of energy and join into that as a guide and help give framework for all that they're holding and all that they're going through in whatever way to be ritualized in preparation for a journey, right? It's like a catapult. How do you crank it back? If it's really going to be this catalytic moment, you can take psychedelics 1,000 times and miss in a way. And also, what is it to stick the landing on the other side, right? Like these are all, but if it's really going to be this catalytic moment where you know, really what I think is a lot of it's about completions, how do we put something down, be complete? That begins long before, right? So ritual is a tool for the unconscious to give form. And guides, the more broad they are in how they create ritual, it's a personal ritual for the client, it's not for the guide. So I want to say that in this, there are cultural containers that have very structured things. There are all kinds of different ways this goes. It's a massive field of what people create as holding a space and how they hold ritual. You have modern new stuff. You have, again, indigenous cultures where that is not just a ritual, that is a cultural heritage, and not just a belief structure, but a complete cultural identity that medicines are a part of. And we generally, even if we interact with them, we're not in the same world as that's a part of. And those are sort of unique and special, also not to be appropriated from. They aren't just take the sage or these tools and use them. They're part of a much greater universe that you engage with. You're so fortunate. So there's a lot to be said about ritual, but that's it in a broad sense. How do we help the unconscious? So think of times in your life where in some way or another form, some sort of form gave you the opportunity, be it yoga, be it something like Burning Man, which has like an arc to the week, be it a ceremony, be it going to prayer or mass. They all have this arc to kind of how they work, right? Like there's an intro and a build-up and a done, like how the tool of ritual and ceremony is used throughout time over and over and over. And many times it's rooted within cultural beliefs, which are great, but a lot of our burdens also come from culture. What you mentioned earlier is the wound of culture. So to quote our friend Terrence McKenna, culture is not your friend. And a lot of the beliefs that we hold personally, a lot of our own are cultural baggage, you know, and our own identity, who we are, is actually not tied to culture. You know, and so meeting psychedelics can be a confrontation of a lot of our like core beliefs of who we are. Like you said, your personal thing there, right? These are what we all can confront. You know, we are running an operating system, and that operating system is etched by experience and the meaning we make out of it. And that's it throughout thousands of years of time, however that is happening. So ritual and ceremony become opportunities for experiences, and psychedelics can become opportunities for very powerful, profound experiences. Again, if you have an experience of the unity of God, there is no going back. That's it, right? But integrating it into your life for years to come, that is a moment-to-moment process. So I'll answer a quick question. Let's hear it.
Sorry for my English, but when you say healing technique, right, it's you mean when we healing some trauma, right, somatic trauma. But what the difference with what make technique healing but not re-traumatizing?
Great question.
So in general, like I said, finding completion, the felt experience of completion. What is it to be complete? And a lot of it is all the barriers we put up between us and that. And one of the things you raised, re-traumatization, psychedelics, some people by going back and accessing their healing are in a sense creating a loop to neurally train themselves to go back to those memories over and over and over. If you're not careful with therapy and other stuff, you can be neurally training yourself to go into wounding and fragmentedness. What I would say is reach for your sense of wholeness and your drive for freedom, and then work on what limits you. It's like the tethers of our past. If we just keep going to the past, just because, I was going to talk about this more at the end, I need to go process my mom and dad again. I need to process the missed thing of my childhood. I need to reprocess that trauma again. What is it to be complete with it? And when you're in that complete moment, to really plant your flag there as a felt experience, there's nothing left to do here. Because every time we go back to heal, and if we're not careful, we train ourselves to be in this loop. And you'll see people who are doing their work decades later, still processing mom and dad at age 50 with 30 years of therapy. And you're like, at some point the therapy is to not do therapy anymore. So that's, I mean, it's like trauma and other things, you're right. There's a very fine line, and this is where the necessity for, I guess, instead of trauma training, I spent a year training with an amazing somatic trauma therapist trainer. Just incredible work. And yeah, you need those skills even in the presence of psychedelics, and tracking traumatic activation during a journey is part of the skill of being a guide. Right? So we need that. If you're not aware of it or you spiritualize it, you can miss it, and that can lead to reactivation and re-traumatization if someone goes out of their window of tolerance. I'm going to use some technical therapy terms. Does that answer your question? Yeah. But it's an important subject, because what is it to find completion and healing as a felt experience? And sure, stuff still comes up, but again, we're programming in what somatic therapy is doing, what ritual, what all these things do, is the opportunity to be etched by present moment experience as we are re-accessing past experience. This is one of the major principles in somatic therapy of what's called missed experiences. We're longing for something, and if we really tasted it. So the example I'll give, imagine you just never felt safe in your life from the time you were 0 to 1 years old. You came into a chaotic world. It was completely unsafe. You were born in a war zone. You've never really known safety, and what you get is a 25-year-old who's anxious and depressed and on 3 different medications. But what would it be like for them to really taste safety under the influence of MDMA, which is quieting all the threat stuff? And what if they really began to get it as a felt experience? There's all the thoughts, but that's secondary to like, what if they really felt what it was to be safe? Right? That's the kind of work I'm talking about when we say how does experience, because we are still being etched by experience. And once that experience occurs, that's what it was to feel safe. Now it's possible. Now it's like, I can be safe. It's possible. I felt it. I tasted it. It's not just an idea. Does that make sense? That's how does it apply? Yeah. With trauma, it's how do we get to completions? Which brings up the next third part here, which is relationship. All of this that we're talking about has to be applied in a very intimate, caring relationship, because the relationship holds the safety. And in order for people to be vulnerable, they have to be safe relationally. And that's something that has to be earned over time. It's not, there's, as my therapist said to me, there's how you feel with me now, there's how you'll feel with me in 6 months, there's how you'll feel with me in 6 years. So the guide is holding a relationship, short-term, long-term. You're the stand-in for the other in so many ways. The reflecting surface, the generator of missed experiences. When I was saying in healing stuff, attachment work, attachment theory, the actual feltness of connection with another human and what that is. If you look at attachment theory, secure attachment, how that works through the guiding lens is we are the attachment object, you know, and everything about that comes up. And there's, again, what happens in a long-term guiding relationship is very different than a therapist, because guides tend to spend more time being themselves around the person they're working with. It's not just holding this role for an hour, it's holding it for a whole day, as well as preparation, integration, all these other things. Now that goes on for years, multiple journeys. Not only do you build a very deep intimacy with someone you're working with, and core material of people. I mean, again, the missed experience of the child, the 2-year-old who needed to be held and clings to you, right? And again, your own somatic field is the reference of what's happening here. If I contracted at that moment when someone needed to be held, there's not words for how that is felt, but it was immediately registered, right? So guides as the stand-in for the other is the challenge of also holding that role cleanly in your own energy, right? And that's very different than therapists who don't ever touch people. The medical world faces the challenge of dealing with touch, because to completely exonerate it is a problem, but it is also the gateway to a whole lot of other stuff happening, including abuse. So guides in relationship, and what happens over a long arc of time is there's a lot of dual relationships within guiding work. It is not easy to hold it in the same lens that psychotherapy and medical care, you know, and they'll do a good job, but it's also like part of the intimacy of closeness. And when we look at plant medicine communities, large group ceremony, church settings, there's always the relational dynamics happening within the group, which if you spend enough time around it, you'll start to pick up on the in circle, the outside, like, you know, and this is also where it's like guides are imperfect people, you know, like they're the more that the attention's on this person, right? And also the potential for people like narcissists and others to really take on the power of the role. The relationship piece is a huge piece, right? But just in the healing aspect, it is the feltness of the other, and also getting out of somebody's way. You know, how do you make the focus not on the guide, but on the person who's having their own experience with the medicine? That's what they came for, not the guide, right? So again, people can make the role so much about themselves. All my things, and my doing this, and my doing that, and it's getting in the way of the person, even if it's culturally appropriate or whatever, right? So the role is complicated because there's times you need to be leading people and they absolutely need you there, and there's other times get out of the way. Music, ritual, other things become the container. Movement, nonverbal things that are happening, right? Just like here, shut up and just go on the dance floor. Like, you know? So it's interesting to sort of see the world of psychedelics that's so cerebral, and there's so much need for that, and yet the application of the work is so experiential that even if you have a PhD and you're brilliant, it's the experience felt moment, you know? So those sort of are the three principles, like I said, healing techniques, ritual, and relationship. And whether we're talking 1,000 years ago or 1,000 years from now, that's pretty much what it's going to be about. Any questions before I sort of how does this apply to actually, what does it look like to do a journey, right? Because we sort of just laid some pillars and I said this is what the role of the person is in experience sharing, but next is how the fuck does this come to life, right? But before I moved on, any questions on this, and this will be doing good on time.
Do you imagine?
Don't ask about the future.
Do you imagine that, you say relationship, which is interesting to me, does a person need to have a guide who is that's the role of that person in their life?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if I was to define it, the role of the guide, much as therapists study the role and relationship in therapy, the role of the guide should be studied to such intricacy. And there's the one-on-one role, there's group role. There really is different archetypes of guides. There are guides who are ceremonialists. These are people who lead groups and they create large ritual and ceremony. This happens within churches, right? You also have within this a very special thing, which is indigenous cultures. And those are, again, unique because they are a whole worldview. They're not just a system of religious belief, right? And we should work to protect indigenous communities. And also, here's the other side, which is indigenous communities and their knowledge is not necessarily what an NDMA therapist needs. And I understand there's this very strong tug of war here, and it's a powerful conversation to have. But these are also distinctly different, yet should all be allowed to have their own space. And the most important thing we can do is protect indigenous communities' land and what is their causes, and to be really culturally attuned to that. And if you're using things that come from other cultures, to really understand cultural appropriation and right relationship with indigenous communities. So I want to make us strong because I've gotten to experience enough, been so blessed to make it very strong, that clarity around that. But beyond that, the role of the guide in our modern times, the one-on-one role is very similar to a therapist. It is the only role this person holds in your world. It is confined to a non-dual relationship. However, there are times, and again, when it happens within groups and other things where there are dual relationships coming to ceremony where you know the person leading or you know the guide, it tends to be that the transferences are more, eventually there's something comes up because it's hard to be someone's friend and also have them be this role. It is possible, but it's usually medicine people who do that with each other rather than people who just attend. You'll see a lot of people kind of keep some level of distance from being too personal with the people who come to ceremonies because they get to hold that role and let you kind of project with them in a way. One-on-one, just like therapy, having that person be that most intimate sort of pillar and that no, you don't ever have to have dinner with them on a Friday night or, on the weekend you're hanging out in a common community. However, things like Burning Man, that gets really, so here's the thing, medicine work is fraught with dual relationships. It's knowing the limits of them. I'm saying we need to stop here so that we can maintain a right relationship, maintain friendship over the therapeutic relationship and be careful about blurring them. And codependency. Codependency is a guy, a therapist, whatever. Don't be someone's healer because it does something for you. But that's the journey of being the rescuer. I can speak to that. But codependent guides, codependent therapists, blurring boundaries, trying to save people, these are all, that's when it gets complicated. It's very complicated. And this is the difficulty of being a guide. People are like, oh, the journey, the medicine, that's this much of it. The rest of it's all the other stuff with people, including screening them. And again, it's one thing to do a journey once, it's another thing to work with someone for 3 or 4 years over the course of the journeys and the depth of what comes up in people. Profound. So how does this all apply to this? Well, you have from intake to integration as the classic psychedelic guide model, right? So working somatically oriented is through intake to integration with this role of the guide, which is, again, in attachment work, you have to be yourself. I'm even doing it with you guys. If I just stood up here and did this total didactic, it would suck, right? There has to be a back and forth, and there's the right fit between people, right? And that's where culture and backgrounds and skills and all these other things figure into what is the right person for you. And I will say this in general, medicine already has a way it's been moving in the world for hundreds, if not thousands of years, which is small numbers and intimate relationships. This whole capitalism game that wants to magnify it into big numbers, it just seems to have problems every time. So we'll see how this goes, but you can kind of get my opinion on it. In the end of the day, it's a service, and it needs to be very personally attuned, as much as heart surgery or brain surgery. Right? Do you want to pay guides that much? That's the other part of it, right? Cost, access. There's only so much people are willing to pay. It's about $3,000 to $5,000, whether that's going to Peru or Mexico or here or there for a retreat or working one-on-one with a guide. That is sort of the set metric. If you want to make guiding $20,000 for a journey, it's just not going to work. So in the end of the day, guides are providing experiences, and it is a very personal and attuned service. When we look all over the world, small numbers and intimate relationships is how that's been going on for a very long time. And getting in front of the medicine to make it about yourself in some way, including money, tends to backfire. So I'll just leave it at that. And I'm not just talking now, I'm talking, and again, we can point to the NAC, why do they not take money? Why do there's reasons that all these things are there. So that being said, like, what is the arc of guided work from intake through to integration, working somatically? Well, as you get to know somebody, you can use somatic tools all along the way. As I said, there's different archetypes to the guide. I mentioned the ceremonialist, but I'll mention some others. There's the one-on-one therapist, which feels therapist-y if you're in the sphere of that. Talk didactic therapy, even if it's somatic. A lot of MAPS' PTSD study, this is what they're doing. It's a talk didactic tool, primarily. They don't have a dance floor. They don't have like a stripper pole in the middle, like, you know what I mean? Like, there's a bunch of other things that aren't there. So the role of holding that tends to feel therapist-y. And there are psychonauts, right? The do-it-yourself generation take substances in whatever container is available or lack thereof, and lack safety otherwise one way or another. The Terrence McKenna generation, 5 grams in silent darkness. He was like, the only guide you need is the guy next door to just make sure you don't do something stupid. But other than that, stay away, right? Because here's why, that relationship piece, the influence in relationship is also where harm can happen, right? The transference potential under medicine is so vast. And, so there are some people who are like, wow, the guide should be way distanced off. So you have this huge range that it occurs in. So from the moment you meet someone at intake, it's already begun. Their relationship with you has begun, and whatever it's about has begun. And your felt experience, them of you and you of them, is this whole attunement process leading towards a journey. And there is a right fit and there is a right time for a journey. It has its own organic process that comes in someone's life when they're ready. It's not a prescriptive sort of thing. And the process of intake and getting to know someone really in depth and what their core material is about and why they're here and what's happening in their life is like you're joining in with a stream with somebody, and you can get the felt experience of someone's life. And at any moment, just like I did that little thing with you, during intake, you can do those things with somebody and begin to work somatically from the very beginning. Especially going into preparation, where it's like preparing for a journey is the cranking back of the catapult. What is it for this day to be a catalytic day for you? Well, how do you prepare for that? What are all the elements? Again, when we think of ritual, this is where the guide is like merely taking that which is already in someone and giving form to it, and high amounts of creativity, plus the hand of God in the unseen starts to make its presence felt. And again, the guide is a guide and resource for what's happening in the client's life. It's not about your ritual, your ceremony, it's about them. So the more adaptable you are, the better, right? And there's a huge range of study of people involved with this. And then the next stage is actually coming into the journey itself, where again, the use of somatic tools is being focused upon in research in all these ways, but really it begins by planting all the flags long before. Explore the territory. If you're a body worker, you could do 2-3 body work sessions with people. You can do somatic therapy, the hybrid of the two. You can work in so many ways, spiritual, ritual practices that are really tilling the soil long before you ever get to the journey. This isn't just take the medicine and let's see what happens. You can really put all the pieces on the chessboard if you spend the time. And this is a relational piece. The more time you're spending with someone, guess what? You're earning the trust of their unconscious. You're getting more and more attuned with one another. There's what's being talked about, but there's the time together. There's the tracking someone over weeks, seeing how they do feedback with homework, what happens in their life. You're blending in with someone's world, and at a certain point, there's a time for the journey, and that makes itself clear. But to be good at being a guide and be efficient is also like, we're not just shooting in the dark. How do we put all that together? And by the time you get to the journey, that's the ignition switch. And that's going to be what the medicine does and whatever way that goes, and you just better be ready for it. I don't know what else to tell you if you think you want to handle that. And now, yeah, the application of in the journey felt experience work is, you know, what we classically now know as the guiding model. You know, music, body work, therapy, talking, nonverbal. You know, whether it's tarot cards, art, other things that bring forth creativity, manifest movement. You know, dance. You know, work like Feldenkrais work like. So many different unwinding techniques. There's so much that can come into what happens in a journey, and music as the felt experience generator. But again, the eye mask comes off, people come out into the room, and now all that's set aside, and they're talking with the guide, and there's no training for make it up as you go, but that's what it is, it's make it up as you go. Including that people can turn dark. You're an abuser, you're trying to harm me, I'm not safe with you, because I'm not safe with other people, or I'm a narcissistic personality, I'm collapsing, and I turn myself into the victim and you into the perpetrator. That's what I do, and under the stress of medicine, that's what I'm now going to do to you. So as much as there's harm from guides harming clients, there's also clients who harm guides by projecting that the guide is a harmful person. And that can turn extremely unsafe. It happens here at Burning Man. People think they're under threat and things like that. And so I'm like, this is not all sparkles and rainbows. And so the extreme of what happens during a journey and how people can come out of it or into it is the vast range, and just prepare yourself for the most unexpected. That's why I'm like, it's the same as surgery in that way. You really don't know what's gonna happen no matter how well put together somebody is. And you have to have total faith and trust in the medicine and you roll with that, and that's your own personal work in the long run. Again, somatically, you have to hold all of this big field that's there. The other side is then into integration, where again, the use of somatic techniques, whether it's therapy, bodywork, can be re-accessing and completing aspects of the journey, as well as implanting really positive things. I really think of it as help people come into there's a capital S self, holism, the word is all over the place now, centered, ground, whatever it is, where we're just here with ourselves. And when you help establish that with somebody, often through MDMA therapy, other things like that, they're then able to explore their woundedness in a lot of other ways, as well as move towards that which is their purpose in life. And that's what we're ultimately all here for. It's about moving forward. We're only applying healing techniques to that which is limiting you, right? But some people are ready to move forward. That's it. They don't need to go backwards at all. We must heal the past and move forward. Yeah, to a degree, only in the degree that it stops you from moving forward. And likewise, if you're only into moving forward and you're like a spiritual bypasser and you don't want to deal with your past, you're going to find that the tethers of it eventually rip you back and you're only able to get so far. So it's like a dynamic tension of a rubber band in a way. And so I'm like, if we're able to access and use somatic work to get the imprints of what happened in the journey in that limbic level, this is where the imprints last a long time, and the longer arc of how psychedelic guiding works. So integration is a felt experience model. Even if you go to a ceremony and it was a whatever, you know, down in South America, this, that, the other it's like there is a felt resonance from it, and there is the integrating of that. And that's much more than just beliefs. And the most powerful integrations are the ways we move inside of ourselves, you know, and our state of being. And being a guide is truly working in that matrix with somebody in real time, and being the architect for experience, including that people are having non-dual, fully expansive, no sense of self experiences, and holding space for that, right? And again, that's for something you to get out of the way of. And so that's this complexity of this role. I think I'm gonna sort of like, my last bit here is where does this all go from here? Questions, yeah, on the guiding process. I'm doing good on time too.
It's about question a little bit about first part of your speech. Can you describe like kind of roadmap of good therapy, like you said, because all of them kind of similar, like cultural therapies, there's like some rituals, right? You said it's like all of them go
There's
on
the
one.
art.
Yeah. But what is the
yeah,
art?
totally. Yeah. No, this is great. I'm borrowing a bit from a particular training. Again, I sort of want to don't name organizations and people. I stand on the shoulders of just amazing training and mentorship, and people have had so much faith and care. All the things I'm speaking about, relationship, I've experienced them. I know what it is to have a medicine person be so like a long-term attachment figure or other things, whether that's in South America or with modern therapists here. I've experienced all of it. The art of sort of into the unconscious, whatever barriers those are to lead towards transformation, accessing into something in ourself, right? Making contact with it on the surface. So it's sort of like we did with the mindfulness. There's sort of an in, but then there can be barriers that keep us from having transformation occur, healing or whatever. And that's where therapeutic techniques gets applied. But then once transformation gets going, it is like a runaway freight train. The system itself is capable of reorganizing, and once given the proper stimulus, it does. It's mostly about the barriers that are in the way. Some people don't have a lot of barriers, just keep going. So, it's like that process then leads to, as we come out of that, we're not in the same state that we were where we began. Whatever the healing arc is, you begin over here, whatever happens over here, and out the other side, you feel different. If you do a good therapy arc, you're not in the same place you were. If you do a good yoga class or qigong or whatever, you're not in the same state that you were. There's an arc to it. And there's also barriers that can come up. And the cultivation of that state is the state of being. English struggles with it, subject-object oriented. Japanese has better words. You mentioned I saw you knee walking at 20 years of Aikido, right? Japanese, like words like zanshin, which means like, we translate it as tranquility, but that's not really, it's their state of being is like we are generating experience. So when we're wounded and we're perturbed about something, we have a whole process, and then we're not anymore. And where are we resting in ourselves now? And again, capital S, self, wholeness, whatever. But ultimately, in the end of the day, you don't have to do the healing arc. The state of being thing, like when we look at Zen or any of the, like all these other things, they're practices around state of being. Even taking psychedelics and going out into the flow state of dance or whatever, it's a state that you're in. Psychedelics are a state shifter. Healing tools help you work through your state and shift in some way. They are transport vehicles for the self. Right? Music can do it, ritual can do it, technique can do it, but you do it yourself, and a guide is just looking for where the barriers are, helping you connect the dots, and saying keep going. Like I said, they're there for you, they're to the right of you, the left of you, behind you, and only in front of you when you need them to be, in a way, and that's the difficulty of it. Right? So how do you generate those things or recognize where someone's at a barrier or struggling, and the application of technique and tool? Like again, there are numerous ones, right? So that's sort of but that arc is common to therapy, is common. And again, state of being, fragmented, being parts or fragmented is we're in some sort of looping wheel, whatever. The thing I talked about earlier, how experiences shape belief, core beliefs, like I said, that I'm not safe, shaped by experience. This is, in a way, the healing is like generating new experiences, right? But those also shift our state. The feeling of feeling safe and who you are inside of that is a different person than when you are in the feeling state of not feeling safe. The way you look at the world is completely different. That's what I mean by state. And if we have a non-dual, expansive return to God, that is a state of non-duality and unity beyond self. But there's still a sense of wholeness in a person when it's super chaotic and fragmented, right? So it's like, that's sort of what we find over time is like, how do we sort of rest in ourselves? And a healing work a lot of times is quieting down that which is disrupting our ability to simply be with ourselves. And we should only attend to that which is disrupting it. We shouldn't just be going to the past to heal over and over because that's what we think we should do and chisel away. This is the hard part about re-traumatization is what if we're just re-accessing the past over and over? And if we're not careful, we can use psychedelics to deepen it by having these deeply cathartic, like, I've been there, and it's, you know, if you're not careful, you're a catharsis junkie and kind of going in a loop, and you'll see a plateauing and healing with people. It happens a lot in ritual plant medicine communities because there isn't as much personal to it. It's a bigger field. But you'll see people sort of doing the same art for years, and they're into the medicine community. You know, so it's sort of like, this is the edge of the nuances of this. Your questions have been very on point, so to speak, right? And yeah, you can slip over really easily. Likewise, a client can be caught in their own arc. If you work with somebody for a long period of time, you will see where they struggle with themselves, as we all do, and you have to be patient, and this is where the relationship with the guide and the trust to see your way through it. Clients have their lives go apeshit sometimes. A journey can like blow someone's world apart. Someone's world can get blown apart, and then they're coming to you for a journey. Someone dies, someone this, someone that, like, life happens and you're in this role with this person, and there is no training from that other than just you have to be dedicated to people. You just have to love people and be dedicated and choose the right people to work with. Because you can't turn someone away and say, I'm done with you, when you're 2 years in and they're in their most deep core stuff. That's like, everyone's like into the glitz and glam, and it's like the root of this is you have to really care about people, and you're gonna be put in hard positions as a guide. Unexpected stuff is gonna come your way. And the life of being a guide, not easy. Fun, I love it, but not easy. You know? So there's a lot of sparkles, and I'm kind of ready for the hot, sexy Instagram 25-year-old influencer energy to move on from psychedelics, and I think it's beginning. It's beginning, just like Burning Man. Oh, it didn't sell out this year. Yeah, we can do without the influencers. My bad. The people, like a lot of the world in the what I call the post-Michael Pollan world hasn't seen what I call hard times with psychedelics. They've seen that everything's healing, is that you haven't had a friend end up in or hurt themselves, or so or be a guide where someone you're working with commits suicide, or harm someone, or tells you about how they raped someone, or. These are not things you're prepared for, yet they're absolutely incumbent with the territory. You're going to be projected at and looked at more than you can believe, and your own personal stuff is just right there with all of it. And we're supposed to do this all perfect, and here's the last part of this. The realities of abuse and harm are, show me a single profession with 1,000 licensed people that all 1,000 of them aren't doing something unethical at some point. There is a startlingly difficult conversation to have here, you know, and I've been involved in communities where these things have happened, and I've seen power abuse and harm. It is a very difficult conversation, but it will never be zero, yet we should be ever vigilant. But what just happened with MAPS and the FDA and like the background of all that, there's some hard things to swallow about all this, about when it doesn't go well. You know, and that's, I'm ready for the sparkle to wear off. And someone there saw this quote recently that 90% of the people who want to be a psychedelic guide right now will probably not be here in 5 years. I think that's probably true. Certain dedication of people will love the work. The people from 10 and 20 years ago were all true believers who got guiding from an underground thing that it had been for decades into where it's at today. There's a new generation who is new to psychedelics and hasn't seasoned themselves yet. And it's all sort of heading into a sort of vacuous future. The capitalist money, just like cannabis, will come and go. The want to make all this money in public, and sure, and psychedelic therapy, medicalized psychedelic container will occur, and it should, but that is not the only container. There's a good argument for churches and other things, and when we look internationally, psychedelics are already accessible all over the world in all kinds of ways. It is a competitive market. Like I said, you don't need to spend more than $3,000 to $5,000 for an amazing week or two somewhere doing whatever version of in-depth work with people who are actually really attuned with you, or work with one-on-one with a guide, which $3,000 to $5,000 for the amount of time that a guide puts into the work. They're just making therapist wages. This is not ridiculous amounts of money. It seems inaccessible to some, but you're looking at the medical container easily being 40, 50, 60,000. And the medical system runs on efficiency. How many therapists do you know who take insurance? How many good therapists do you know who take insurance? Few. Why? Because insurance only pays them so much and it makes them run on a rabbit wheel, like a hamster wheel. That system applied to psychedelic therapy will cause misses and burnout in the people doing it. It's gonna happen. The substances, commodification, who cares? In the end of the day, the substance comes down to a service. Just like a therapist, the more attuned, the more present, which involves them having space in their life to be able to show up that way, the better the work is going to go. So it's going to be a rocky road, and it's going to happen. Australia is already, like their whole medical system is already carte blanche going for it. So the United States is just one player, right? But there is this people who want to take it down because they want it to be perfect, and it will not be perfect. It will be messy. I do agree with that. Yeah, and the conversations of ethics, power abuse, money are very complicated, need to keep being had, but there is no large-scale number that is going to make it zero ever, and that's hard to digest. And it happens now within all the things we're talking about, plant medicine communities, etc. So there's my little spiel of jadedness for the future. I nailed it. There we go.
You nailed the time. Is
Yeah.
Dave here?
That's Dave.
You said that just a minute ago. I thought you were that Dave.
got introduced. I said, I'm Dave. You're still Dave.
Wow. Wow.
If you want to find me in the world, my website, my name, it's all the same thing now. I've gone public to some degree around somatic training and training. I believe in training good practitioners to be, there always want to be people who want to do good at the work, whether that's within the medical container or in other containers, and I'm offering skills training, particularly around touch and osteopathic touch in the context of guiding work, because that license holding system needs to figure out how to engage with touch in the right way within the container, and because of the other work I do and orthopedic work, a lot of medical, so I offer professional mentoring. And biggest thing with guides too is the first 3 to 5 years is you need people who are more experienced than you, helping you develop, asking questions, all your own stuff. We're just in the beginning, and it's not off to a great start. So most of the training out there is not experiential, it's theoretical. And I cannot tell you how many therapists are actually afraid to take medicine themselves, and when they do, just blow apart. No offense to the therapists, but a lot of them are they can learn about guiding watching people swim because they're not getting in the pool. So being a client, and I understand that not everyone can be a client and be trained that way. I understand that there's a limit to that. But I think to engage with psychedelics and talk about, it's when I was in martial arts, we're talking about self-defense in a dojo. That's like learning to swim on land. Learning, taking online classes for any of this stuff or whatever credential. That's like learning to do this by observing people swim. You're gonna have to get in the water, and you're gonna have to half drown a lot to figure it out. And people need lifeguards and supervision and support. And for everything I've said, there will be people who just want to do good and they're dedicated to this work. And I think that that's a certain percentage of people. And again, it's a life journey. And in the end, it is your own felt experience, your own life, your own what you take away from Burning Man or other things that ends up being your pillar as a guide. You sort of cut it there.
Aikido for 20 years. Wow.
Neck doesn't handle a lot of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at one time.
Oh man, I feel you. Not 20 years for me, just 7 or 8, good times.
Still stays up pretty well.
Next up, we've got Dave Solomon. That was so much fun. Thank you, Trevor. I really enjoyed that. I need to catch up with you after. I feel like you're me with more life experience. Mr. Dave, lovely tutu on Tutu Tuesday. This is my first burn, so I did not bring a tutu, but now I know. Tutus, Holy Toledo,
Set
Ohio.
up my thing on.
Sounds good to me. Set up. Well, without further ado, sir. A microphone for you.
Micah, Ika, Herman. I prefer German. It's less dramatic.